Glory to the newborn King, man. This is second Sunday in Advent, the Sunday of peace, and we're talking about God with us, John. God with us, John. Because John was that individual that God chose to prepare the world for Jesus. You see, every event requires preparation for the event to take place. And the greater event, the greater the amount of preparation that is needed. It doesn't matter what it is. So like a Thanksgiving meal. You know, Thanksgiving meals don't just happen, do they, Karen? They just do not, they just don't happen magically by themselves. Man, you have to go through an entire process of putting all the things together. First, you have to decide who's going to come and what time they're going to get there. Then decide upon a menu, you know, what you're going to serve. What do you think your guests will like? Then after you get the menu together, you have to try to figure out how much servings per person, how much food you need, amount of food you need for each item. Then once you get that together, you got your shopping list, then you go to the store. And you go up and down the aisles trying to find all the things you need, hoping the store will have all the things you need, and sometimes it doesn't. But once you've got your baskets full and you bring your Thanksgiving goodies back home, you've got to figure out some place to put them. Refrigerator, freezer, neighbor's house, garage. Wherever you can find, you've got to store them up and get them ready. But then as the day comes closer, you've got to figure out your preparation time. How far ahead to begin to prepare. For Karen, I mess with Karen because when they have Thanksgiving meal, they have like 50 people come. And so she prepares weeks ahead of time. And not quite that many, but about half that though, isn't it, Karen? About half that. And I know she told me she begins cooking days ahead and has stuff ready. And you got to figure out your burners, your oven size, when to begin, how long it's going to take to cook to get it all set, so that when everyone comes to this beautiful table that you've already decorated, prepared for Thanksgiving meal, they can all come together, and when they sit down, the food will be nice and hot, and you create this amazing Thanksgiving memory for everyone who's there. But every human event takes preparation. And as it is with us as humanity, so it is with God. Every time God decided to do something in his world, to bring about something of a God-sized nature, he made sure that his world was prepared for it and knew what was coming. In the days of Noah, when God was preparing to flood the earth, he came to Noah and let Noah know what he was getting ready to do. And he told Noah, you better build an ark. The flood's coming. In the day of Abram, God was going to build a nation for himself, a people set apart for himself. And he told Abram, hey, this is what I want to do, and I want to do it now, and you're going to be the founder of this nation. Amos says in the book, surely the sovereign Lord does nothing without revealing his plan to his servants, the prophets. God does absolutely nothing without preparing for his world with what he's about ready to do. And 2,000 years ago, God was getting ready to send his son into this world, and he wanted to make sure his world was ready for it. So he made sure that he was going to have this young child named John be born into this world to prepare it for Jesus. The year's around 0 BC. The years, for hundreds of years, the people of Israel have been saying, Messiah, Messiah, he's coming. Messiah. And as the time of Messiah drew ever near, God made ready by preparing a couple to have their son John. The couple's name was Zechariah and Elizabeth. John, who would prepare the world for Jesus. Luke chapter 1, verse 5. In the time of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah, who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife, Elizabeth, was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were upright in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commandments and regulations blamelessly, but they had no children because Elizabeth was barren, and they were both well along in years. Now notice, in the time of Herod, king of Judah, The coming of Jesus is not just some kind of fairy tale, once upon a time story. Jesus' arrival happened at a specific time in history to a specific group of people. And so God began to work with a Jewish family, an elderly Jewish couple, Zechariah and Elizabeth, whose stories were grounded in history. Zechariah was a priest. Elizabeth was his wife was of the family of priests. They were both upright in the sight of the Lord. And as God looked down on their lives, he saw, man, these lives they're living for me are really awesome kind of lives. They were obedient. They followed his commandments. They loved him greatly. And they were blameless. They did all things right, and they lived lives rightly. So God is going to prepare Zechariah and Elizabeth for a son whose purpose would be to prepare their people in the world for God's Son. Verse 8. Once when Zechariah's division was on duty, and he was serving as priest before God, he was chosen by Lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to go into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And when the time for the burning of incense came, all the assembled worshipers were praying outside. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. And when Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to give him the name John." Your prayer has been heard. Your wife will bear you a son. The Jewish rabbis, they had these sayings they'd put together. And they had this list of people who were excommunicated from God. And on this list, they said one person to be excommunicated from God was a Jewish man who did not have a wife. And if he had a wife, if he did not have a son. And so for all these years, Zechariah and Elizabeth had carried this mark of disgrace, almost shame. Yet they never stopped believing in God, and they never stopped praying for a son. And on this day, especially this day, Zechariah decided to go forward because he was chosen to burn incense before the Lord. Now, a priest could live his entire life and never have the opportunity to enter in the temple and to burn incense before the Lord. But Zechariah was chosen. In the Jewish mind, there would never be another time in his life that he would stand so close to God in the temple, burning incense as the people were outside praying. And so Zechariah decided, why not? And he prayed again for a son. And the angel said, "Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to give him the name John." And God prepared Zechariah and Elizabeth for John so that he would go and one day prepare the people for Jesus. Verse 14. Speaking about John, "And he will be a joy and delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth. For he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He has never to take wine or other fermented drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even from birth. And many of the people of Israel will he bring back to the Lord their God, and he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and the power of Elijah to turn the hearts of the fathers to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." And Zechariah asked the angel, "How can I be sure of this? I'm an old man and my wife is well on in years." And the angel answered, "I am Gabriel. I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and tell you this great news. And now you will be silent and not be able to speak until the day this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their proper time." You know, so many people wrestle with the question of what is their purpose of life, especially young adults. What is their purpose? What are they supposed to do? Who are they supposed to become? What is going to be their mark that they're going to leave behind? What is it that their legacy, what do they want that to be? But John was fortunate. His purpose for him was laid out even before he was conceived. What he would be doing, what his legacy would be, the mark he would leave. And we find this in verse 17. And we go back to it, Kate, in verse 17. And he will go on before the Lord in the spirit of Elijah. All right, Kate, should be the next one. Is it on there? Okay, well, we can go with this. And I thought it was set off by itself. One more. There we go. Good job, young man. Notice the sequence of things as his purpose is laid out. There's a sequence here. And he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and the power of Elijah. Before John could carry out his purpose that God had for him in this life, he had to make sure his life was in line with God. You know, a lot of people live life for themselves. And I've been around them and you've been around them. You know, all that they live for, it's all about them. And they live, all the experience they have, they want to have for them. The life they want to live, they want to live for them. And everything they do, it's all about what they can get out of life. And we're with people like that, and we don't feel comfortable with that. But there are other people who live life for others, their lives for others. Giving away to others, sacrificing for others, loving others, making a difference in this world for others. And we can get behind that. We think, hey, that's awesome, and, you know, great job, and we want to be just like you. But even beyond that, if we have indeed been created in the image of God, if we've been made some way and shape or form out of his image, then we only become the people, the men and women he's created us to be, and can only fulfill the purpose he has for us as we live out of that image, as we live our lives for God. And like John, go on before the Lord in the spirit and in the power of Elijah, the prophet. To turn the hearts of their fathers to their children. You see, once our lives are aligned with God, we realize that our purpose is to help others align their lives with God as well. And part of this is next generational. You know, people have always said that Christianity is just one generation away from extinction. And I like to say, man, I believe that Christianity is just one generation away from changing the world. And we are to help the next generation do exactly that. By turning their hearts to God. By seeking God. By loving God. And living out their lives for God. And the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous. You see, our purpose is not only next generational, it is this generational. It is today. We are to turn the hearts of people who disobey God to obey God. The hearts of people who do not love God to love God. But, you know, we can't make them love God. I can't make anybody obey God. I'd be wasting my time and you'd be wasting yours. But what we can do is that we can love people with the love of God. As they see the love of God lived out in our lives, they will be attracted to that love and maybe desire to give their hearts and lives to God too. And love him through his Son. To make ready a people prepared for the Lord. All humanity just waiting and ready and prepared for the Lord. And God prepared Zechariah and Elizabeth for John so that John was able to go and prepare the people for Jesus because God was with John. Verse 57. When it was time for Elizabeth to have her baby, she gave birth to a son. Her neighbors and relatives heard that the Lord had shown her great mercy, and she shared her joy. On the 8th day, they came to circumcise the child, and they were going to name him after his father Zechariah. But his mother spoke up and said, "No, he is to be called John." They said to her, "There is no one among your relatives who has that name." Then they made signs to his father to find out what he would like to name the child. And he asked for a writing tablet. And to everyone's astonishment, he wrote, his name is John. Immediately his mouth was open and his tongue was loosed, and he began to speak, praising God. And the neighbors were all filled with awe, and throughout the hill country of Judea, people were talking about all these things. Everyone who heard this wondered about it, asking, what then is this child going to be for? What for the Lord's hand was with him? What then is the child going to be? For the Lord's hand was with him. Because God's hand was with John, everyone wondered what in this world that God was going to do through John. And years later, a passionate, fiery John began to turn the hearts of the people back to God, to their Savior. And that same Lord who is with John is with us today, turning the hearts of the lives of people back to him. And there's no telling what God can do through you and through me and through us to prepare the world for Jesus. That's what Christmas is all about, God with us, and we are doing God's work when we are bring God to the people. This morning I had something incredible happen. You know, you never know what's going to happen in the world. But what took place is that the bus brought the Eden people to us this morning. And the bus driver's name's Tanya Neto. And she was unloading the people off the bus, and she was just smiling and happy. And I said, I asked her what her name was. She said, Tanya Neto. I said, Tanya Neto, I'm Scott. I said, thank you so much for bringing the Eden people to us today, our Eden brothers and sisters. She said, I'm just glad I could be able to do this. I'm so blessed. I'm so joyful. And she was smiling. I said, Tanya Neto, why are you so smiling so much? She said, Scott, because 2 years ago I was homeless. Now this is happening right out in front of the church here this morning. She said, 2 years ago I was homeless, and she gave me permission to share this story. She says, we were homeless, me and my son. I said, what's his name? She says, his name's Ezra. She said, we were homeless. We didn't have any place to live. We didn't have anywhere to go. We didn't know what we were going to do. And we went from house to house and home to home. But you know, she says, Scott, it's just, we were homeless. And then God provided a place for us in this shelter to try to help us, help us. And she said there were some shady people in there. And we were scared, but God provided his care for us, and he watched over us, and he loved us, me and my son. And she said, I want you to know I wasn't always homeless before COVID hit. I had 3 jobs, and I was working. I was providing for us. When COVID hit, all my work shut down, everything I knew, and we just were barely making it, but God provided for us. And now God has provided me a job with MTD Bus Services so that I can serve him for being such a blessing to me and my son. And here on Sunday morning, from what God has brought her through, she was smiling and sharing with the joy that he had given her. And she said, Scott, I want you to know the entire time I had peace. Because I knew that God would provide. This is the second Sunday of Advent, the Sunday of peace. And God has provided for Tanya Nett, and she's going to come pick up our brothers and sisters after we're done today. And I'm going to go out and give her another big hug and tell her, God bless you. And just like her, we're to bring this God of peace to the lives of every person we come in contact with, every life we engage with. And Jesus showed us and that this is so important. That while he was here on earth, when he was getting ready to go to his cross to die for us, to show how much he loved for us, he brought his disciples together. And they had a meal. And he began to talk to them about why he had come, why he was here.